Welcome into episode 369 of the Skate Podcast. I'm Brian DeFelice, joined by Bridget Brew and Scott McLaughlin. Bridget and Scott, the Bruins had an opportunity to build off of a feel-good win, whether the full 60 was pretty or not. Felt like it was a win you could build off of with confidence, and they squandered the opportunity, and they lose to the Stars 7-2. So, Bridget, Scott, opening shifts, let's dive right into it. More of the same from this Boston Bruins team.
Yeah, I mean, that wasn't the response you wanted after the win. The kind of, and I said this. I didn't think that the St. Louis win was a great win anyway, but at least you were able to score 3 goals in the third and come back and have that confidence building moment. But it did not carry over into Dallas. Giving up 7 goals, we can get into the reasons why, but that it's an ugly score. 7-2, that just looks bad on the surface. A lot of things had to go wrong, and they did. I thought they looked very defensively weak. I thought that Dallas kind of took the ice that they wanted and nobody stopped them. A lot of defenders backing up, or I think that last goal, Zaka and Carlo or whoever were just completely faded back, and they kind of gave up on it. But I don't know. It was just ugly to watch. It was certainly not a moment of confidence building. And so now you head into Saturday, kind of right back where you started before the road trip. But at the same time, we kind of knew this was going to be the hardest of the 4-game stretch that they're on here that we were talking about, like the 2 St. Louis games, Dallas and Columbus. This was always going to be the hardest game. Dallas is a good team. But they looked like the Harlem Globetrotters at times out there. And all those 7 goals came even strength. So it wasn't like the same power or penalty kill struggles that they were having, gave up all of these goals. It was even strength. It was just losing the defensive battle. And yeah, guys, I guess just we can get into what went wrong. And I know, Scott, your shift has something to do with this.
Yeah, just a complete lack of intensity, lack of focus, lack of energy, which obviously we're going to get into all of that more and what it means. My opening shift is about Jeremy Swayman, though, who was absolutely part of the problem. He was not good Thursday night. I think at least 3 or 4 of those goals were stoppable. And were there breakdowns in front of him leading to those chances? Of course. The Bruins team wide were not good. Guys not back checking, as you said, like defenders sagging off and giving up ice. Yeah, all of that. And yet, Jeremy Swayman is getting paid $8.25 million a year, is expected to be one of the best goalies in the NHL. And as I've said many times, that means not just making the easy saves, but making a lot of hard saves and bailing your team out and coming up with timely stops. And Swayman is not doing that the vast majority of the season, and he certainly didn't do it Thursday night. He, on the year, is now 5-6-2 with an .888 save percentage. He ranks out of goalies who have played at least 5 games, he ranks 41st out of 55. And even if you want to, try to go deeper, go into the analytics, goal save above expected, it's even worse. He's 48th out of 55 in goals saved above expected. He is not taking goals off the board. He is not stealing points for this team. He is not doing what an elite goalie needs to do. And, we can get into maybe, is this still lingering from missing training camp and all the negotiations and all that? Well, you're over a month into the season. He's played enough games now that even if he's not fully up to his very top level, he should be in a much better spot than this.
Yeah, and Scott, that goal saved above expected stat, what was his number for that? Because that one can be negative, can't it?
Yeah, he is very much in the negative. He is minus 4.6.
Okay, so that means that they think that an average goalie would have made 4 more stops on goals.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah.
I mean, that the first goal of the game, okay, it's a labeled shot It's a bit of a BB by Matt Duchene. It wasn't as bad of a goal against Matt Duchene as Swayman gave up in Boston, which was a terrible first goal of the game to give up against Dallas and Boston. That game, Boston had a 1-0 lead, and Swayman just got beat from distance on the outside, just moving laterally in a completely nonchalant way. And that goal kind of broke Boston's spirits that game. Now, not excusable to lose the rest of the game because of it, but in that game, Swayman wasn't sharp to start. And then last night, that Duchene goal wasn't as bad of a goal, but again, you'd like to see it, some type of save there. The penalty shot, which we can talk about the merits of the awarded shot, but the penalty shot, Swayman loves breakaways. Bridget mentions it all the time. He's usually pretty aggressive, and he's usually, pretty confident. And he just kind of sat there in his blue paint, allowed Dodonov to come in and just finds the 6 hole. So, I'm not going to, it's tough to blame a goalie on a breakaway. I'm not going to do that, but in the category of like, would have been nice. And then just like, look, the one-handed, like, chip shot over his shoulder, just shit like that just can't happen. But we'll get into all that stuff. Logistically, my opening shift, I just want to cover the Hampus Lindholm story, which is that's okay, Bridget. You can take it off.
You were done.
Scott mentioned that Rich Keefe at WEI reports it's a fractured kneecap for Hampus Lindholm. So Brian Googles went into the search engine to see what that could look like, and
Dr. DeFelice.
Dr. Deefs, and if it requires no surgery, recovery time is about 6 to 8 weeks. If it requires surgery, it could be 3 to 6 months. So look, obviously that's a wide range of possibilities, and it depends on the severity of the injury. But let's call it best case scenario. You're probably without Hampus Lindholm until close to the new year, I would say. And so that's something that the Bruins will have to deal with on the back end. And Bridget talked about it, and already struggling back end, even with Hampus Lindholm in the lineup. But he has been, I think we all think, he's been their most consistent player this year. So that's tough news if it's a prolonged injury.
Yeah, and I was really worried there was going to be 3 defensemen down after the hit that Carlo took against Dallas. Jamie Benn I still don't know how this gets changed from a major to a minor after looking at it. Like normally, I don't even know, because and Judd did a good job. He read the rules straight out, and that was textbook. That was a major. And anyway, Carlo comes back. So at the very least, one positive to take away is just that he's not out, because he has a history with head injuries, and you already have Lindholm out for a while. It sounds like you already have Peak out week to week. If you're losing in that 5-game stretch, if you're losing 3 of your top 6 defensemen, you're really not in good shape. There would have required another call up. We already saw Osterley get called up for this game. Who's the next guy up? It's just tough to have one of your best. It would have been like losing your best like lockdown defensive pair, because Lindholm Carlo has been a really solid pair, and no, this season, like, not as good, but in the past that's been a really tough deep pair to go against. So I guess positive to come from it, but guys, that was a brutal call.
So
my
question to you guys is, what is the ref saying if you're trying to get into their minds? And I know you guys didn't agree with it, but what are they saying that the major was rescinded down to a minor for? Was it because in their mind it can't be boarding if it's X distance away from the boards? Because Ben
was boarding though.
Well, no, I know. That's what I'm trying to figure out. Like, what could they? Because it was clear as day on the numbers. I'm trying to figure out what they are saying.
I think so. I've been on this for a couple of years. I think for whatever reason, the NHL has relaxed on hits from behind and boarding, and just 99% of the time now it's just a 2-minute minor. And I don't know why. I think the only stuff we see called majors or that gets least of suspensions now are open ice hits to the head or hits to the head along the boards. But yeah, drilling a guy through the numbers from behind it, like, I just feel like every time I see that over the last few years, it's 2 minutes. So it would be great if someone from the league would ever like answer questions about it. But for whatever reason, they are now just more accepting of that. Like the 5-minute major for hitting from behind is basically non-existent anymore.
Which is crazy. College hockey the trend has been the exact opposite direction.
Yeah.
College hockey, I've spoken to the head official from Hockey East who, like, they talk to the broadcasters. They want us to be able to explain it correctly on TV when we're seeing it and know what the refs are thinking. So we've had conversations and it's always the same thing. It's always, if you're a certain distance away from the board, that is the kind of hit we're trying to get out of the game, because you put someone completely defenseless. They can't put their hands up. They're going to hit their face, their neck on the boards if you hit them from that like 3 to 4 foot distance away from the boards. And that is always going to be a major penalty in college hockey. That they enforce it that way. And it's to get it out of the game before you guys even make it to the NHL. So why is it not the same thing in the NHL when the rule is the same?
And that's why I'm honestly trying to figure out what parameters that they're going off of by their rule book, because I'm trying to figure out if there's like a cheap, specific distance that is classified as a board. Like, if you're a player, you'd rather get hit from behind on the numbers from 5 inches away from the boards and maybe you get a concussion, which sucks, than 5 feet from the boards and potentially, go into the board's neck first. And there's some very much scarier injuries that could happen than a concussion. And so I think that the distance that Ben hit him from behind is far more dangerous. I'm just trying to figure out, because it's so obvious, everybody watching it, that should have been a 5-minute major as they originally called. I'm trying to figure out what they saw to take it, because it's not like they called it a minor, guys, and kept it. They called it a major and rescinded it, which tells me they saw something actively in their minds that
they have to call the major so that they have a chance to review it, because you can't go the other way around.
Right. But they could have kept it. Like they actively chose to rescind it. You know what I mean? Like, what do they see to be like, oh no, that's actually a minor according to our rule books? I don't get what they saw.
And I saw people saying like it's because it's Carlo's fault, like he puts himself in that position. It's like, that's not the rule. The rule is not whose fault it is. It's the guy that's getting blindside hit from behind.
His back is directly to Ben the entire time. Like there's no late turn. Yes, he slows up, but that's because I don't get that argument. Like, oh, Carlos slowed up, so it was hard for Ben to stop. It's like, what did you think Carlos was going to do? Skate full speed into the boards? Like, what are you talking about? Of course he slowed up. Well, that's what every single player does in that situation.
And do you know why they do that? That's a signal. That's a player to player signal of like, I'm in a bad spot here. Like, I'm gonna put the brakes on so that you can bear hug me or something. Like, that's why he did. That's why he did that. That in that situation, instead of the Fanatics logo, Jamie Bench might as well see the stop sign logo that youth hockey used to wear, because like that's a player to player, and all players know that that's what's happening there. And but in any event,
and he's been in the league for a very long time and knows that.
Yeah. I think I would have like a much longer rant on this if, God forbid, Carlo had been seriously hurt or if it had like dramatically affected the game. But guys, and the thing is like, yeah, that was a bad call to reduce that to 2. I thought the penalty shot was a bad call. I don't think Mason Lohrei committed a penalty, much less anything that should have resulted in a penalty shot. It wasn't a clear breakaway. They were like Lohrei's like a little behind him, but he's like there. It wasn't a clean breakaway. But
clean breakaways when like some guy's got like 3 steps on you and you throw your stick in his legs. Like, he was obviously within 1 stride, and like the fact that they were making body contact is enough to say like, okay, that wasn't a clean breakaway.
Well, and then like the ref's arm doesn't go up until the stick lift, which was a perfectly clean stick lift.
I have no way to explain what we saw officiating wise last night.
No, and here's the thing. I would rant about it more, but that is not where the game got away from the Bruins. Like, they actually responded to those fairly well. Charlie Coyle scores to cut it to 2-1 before the end of the first period. Like it's a game back on. It's right there for the Bruins. And then they just absolutely lay an egg in the second period, and especially the second half of the second period. And the game completely gets away from them. And I mean, like, we can run through the goals if we want, but it's like just the play that led up to these goals. It's so many of the same mistakes that we are seeing so often this season of like guys just not making the right play, just seemingly losing focus, not back checking, not getting pucks out of the zone, a careless icing by Johnny Beecher, just like flinging the puck down from his own blue line. Like it's I'm at a loss for how this stuff keeps happening with this team.
Can I say though, first, like, obviously you see your teammate take a big hit and he's a well-liked guy. Everybody knows that. Doesn't that fire you up? Like, doesn't that bring more intensity to your game? Like, I was actually really disappointed in how Jim Montgomery didn't seem to show much of a reaction on the bench when this call gets reduced. And like, I understand coaches have different styles, but like, why isn't this his moment to defend like his players? Like, why isn't he yelling? Why isn't he making more of a stink about it? Because a lot of times it's just gamesmanship too. It's like, all right, you let the refs have it. They give you a makeup call later, whatever. It just wasn't there. And it was one of those things where it's like, is everyone just disinterested in what's going on right now? Because that should be something that engages you. Like, Nikita Zadorov, and he didn't have a great game, but like at least he stuck up for Brendan Carlo and showed some sort of response. From everybody else, I didn't really see anything. So, and that's part of the problem. Like, at the time that happens, I think it was 2-1 or 2-0, and the game was within reach if you just had a spark from kind of getting screwed over 2 times in a row. But the fire just wasn't there, and I feel like that's a point where leadership, meaning coaching, could kind of light a fire. But I don't know. Yeah. I was just kind of surprised when I saw that the reaction was as cool and calm as it was.
Yeah, and you mentioned Zadorov steps up there and drops the gloves with Ben and does very well. Clearly had the upper hand on that fight. And Mark Kastelik, to his credit, was right there as well, who was willing to fight Ben, had Zadorov not stepped in. And nobody here, and I don't think any Bruins fans will question Mark Kastelik's efforts so far this year, or his give a shit meter. He's one of the few Bruins that has been at least trying to bring it every single time he steps on the ice. Not even every game, every shift. He's like trying to make a difference. Sure, he has some mistakes and has, but like no one's questioning his effort. But to your point, Bridget, yeah, like, so Scott, you mentioned the Bruins responded well after going down 2-0. They cut the lead in half 2-1, and they did. Specifically after Carlo got hit, a lack of. I just want, before Carlo got hit though, you're down 2-0. That's a time in the game where you say, okay, Trent, go out there and try to get us going here. Maybe ask somebody off the face-off or try to mix something up. And until Carlo got hit, it was just like, I don't know. I just feel like, the best teams, the good teams, the teams that get it, the teams that are engaged mentally, emotionally, they won't wait for something like your teammate getting hit from behind after being down 2-0, regardless of how you got down 2-0. To spark something. The best teams will take it upon themselves to try to change something around. Maybe it's asking somebody to fight. Maybe they don't oblige because they're winning. Okay, fine. Go snow the goalie. Go stand over their goalie. Like, you got to do something to kind of like get the other team, because you have to get yourself into the fight. And they did. But what I'm saying is, it kind of felt like it took for the Carlo hit before that happened.
Yeah, well, and even after the Carlo hit, like, how about making them pay on that power play? Like, that's obviously, you want to score on every power play. That's when you really want to have. They got one shot on goal on that ensuing power play, and just
were terrible.
And just to be clear, like, I'm not saying like they can't, like, their hair was on fire and they played awesome, had like an amazing response. I'm just saying the game didn't get away from them there. It was still 2-1 at the end of the first period.
And a power play at the beginning of the second to tie it.
Yeah.
No, you're right, Scott. Yeah, no, and I know you weren't saying that. I'm just like what you said was true. They got back and they cut it in half. And again, it's like it's good to see. I know I mentioned Frederick. Frederick, gives Coyle the assist there. Coyle scores his first even strength goal of the season. You hope that gets them going for the rest of the game. We could talk about the defense and their lack of gap controls and their lack of aggressiveness around the Boston goal or whatever. But the forwards, I talked about it last episode. But the forwards, their lack of back pressure, their lack of intensity, everything, it all leads to each other. It's very difficult for your defensemen to be aggressive when you don't have that assurance that your forwards are coming back hard and just top to bottom, on the ice, on the bench, in the press box. If you want to bring in the general manager and the president of hockey operations, like the operation right now is just, it's not a good product. And I think there's everybody has to be responsible for this and to allow things to just keep going as is. The only roster transactions they're doing is sending down Poitras to Providence. It's like, when you have a team that's struggling as mightily as Boston, if you're not going to go make external changes, fine. How
Right,
about?
I think you're forgetting about Patrick Brown.
Well, but if you're not going to go out there,
you're in trouble when not even Patrick Brown can save you.
But if you're not going to go out there and make external changes because that's more difficult, why aren't they at least trying to exercise and utilize their complete organization and try to maybe bring some people up from Providence? And I know there's most people out there that will say Providence farm system sucks, like whatever. But conceptually, why not give a couple of players an opportunity to come up and I don't know. It just seems to me that they're just running out the same shit, and the moves they are doing make no sense. Poitras down to Providence. Patrick Brown comes up because it sounds like you guys said Tyler Johnson had a personal thing, but I don't know. It just seems to me like there's just a refusal to make any sort of changes, even within the organization. Like, what's the harm in giving a couple of players down in Providence a game or two to spark something?
Yeah, we didn't mention it yet, but Jim Montgomery said after the game that Tyler Johnson had a family situation he had to attend to. So he left the team yesterday to go back home. No word on is that multiple games or exactly when he'll be back. But yeah, I kind of think calling up Patrick Brown, I sort of wonder if Johnson has to miss more time, if we'll see something else, because having to fly to Dallas day of game is not an ideal situation. And maybe you rather have someone who's been up and down and made those flights before versus all right, Fabian Lysell, here's your NHL debut. You're touching down at 2:30 p.m. I don't know. Maybe I'm just trying to make excuses, but that could be why.
Well, and I also mean more so going forward too, not specifically Dallas in particular. I just mean going forward. If we just keep seeing, you know what I mean?
Yeah, and yeah, I mean I do think there might have been something to the idea that putting Poitras and Lysell together in Providence, maybe you want to see how they click, and potentially in a week or so it's a double call up and that injects some energy. But it just feels like the Bruins don't really have the luxury of keeping a talented offensive player away from the team right now. We mentioned on the last podcast, but it's I think Poitra's play had dipped, but you just see the lack of creativity further down the lineup when he's not there, and it's I don't know. Can you really keep him down for that long? I know there are things he has to work on. In a vacuum, I wouldn't hate the idea of saying hey, we're going to go give you some big minutes in Providence. You're going to play in all situations. Here's what we want you to work on. If you're comfortably in a playoff spot, okay, I understand that. But this team just needs all the help it can get. And I feel like Poitras is part of the solution, not he was very far from one of their biggest problems. So it's once again, like, it's just an example of this team trying everything they can, I guess, possibly think of, and none of it working. It's like everything they do seems to just immediately blow up in their face this season.
Yeah. And I don't see a double call up happening. I mean, I think that the organization is way too conservative to be like, you know what? Let's just give these two guys a chance together in no. I mean, unless it goes ridiculously right in Providence for like 2 weeks or however long, which I mentioned jokingly last episode. I was like, well, they're just gonna come up, they're gonna have crazy chemistry. Yeah, more than likely not what's gonna happen. But yeah, missing Patra, especially, like, it leaves you in a bad situation because when you do have something happen that one of the guys has to step away from or gets injured, but in this case it was just Johnson having to go home. You had Patra, who'd been in your system all year. You could have just plugged him in, and now you're making a last minute call up of Patrick Brown, who comes in and it's not like he was the problem either, but he certainly wasn't more likely to score than Matt Poitras, or more likely to set up a play than Matt Poitras. So yeah. And I also think like Poitra's a good personality and kind of a positive personality. So sometimes when things are going wrong, like obviously he's a quieter person because he's the youngest guy and he's the lowest guy in the totem pole, so to speak. But he does bring a certain like kind of just chill energy.
So everything you guys are saying about Poitras is true. And in last episode, I spent some time talking about when we mentioned Poitras going down. I talked about how other players, Trent Frederick, Charlie Coyle, have just been completely invisible all year. Coyle, I think, had a nice one-time opportunity opening himself up at the top of the circle from Pasternak early in the first period, midway through the first. I think he either hit the post or Ottinger made a toe save. So scoring chance there, I'll give him that. Scores the goal later in the game on the pass from Frederick, I'll give him that. Still, those guys are far too quiet. But I want to pivot now because we do spend a lot of time talking about the middle six lack of production. I want to talk about somebody that is currently third on a team in scoring, and that's Elias Lindholm. Elias Lindholm has 1 point in his last 5 games. He has 4 points in his last 14 games, all assists. He hasn't scored a goal in 15 games. What's going on with Elias Lindholm, guys? What's your opinion of him so far? Because Bridget, you mentioned this a while ago. Could you scratch him for a game? And my response was he's doing a lot of little things that the details. He's not scoring, but he's playing okay. And I still feel like that's true. And I don't think the Bruins are in a position to scratch anybody with an offensive ceiling. But he was a polarizing player coming in the offseason, prized free agent, relatively speaking, to the free agent class that was available. He has shown in the right team, in the right position with the right line mates in the NHL, he can score 82 points, 3-4 years ago. But he also has some far less productive seasons more recently. And so who's the real Elias Lindholm? Right now, guys, that 82-point season is standing out to be the anomaly because, again, he's third on the team in scoring. He's got 9 points. But like I just said, 1 point in his last 5, 4 in his last 14, no goals in his last 15. That's supposed to be ideally your number 1 center, at least number 2. Even for a number 2 center, it's still kind of like not ideal.
Yeah, I mean, even if you weren't going to get the 80-point Lindholm, like, you at least need the guy who was pretty consistently a 60-point player. And unfortunately, right now, you're getting the one who looks like he did last year in Calgary and Vancouver, where the offense production just never came, and he ended up with 40? I don't have it in front of me, but 40-something points. Yeah, I mean, like, this would have been the fear, right? Is that what if that Lindholm, who didn't produce last year, what if he continued to play like that? What if the change of scenery didn't get him going and get him back to previous levels. And I thought it would, because I thought in theory him and Pastrnak should click pretty well in terms of the way that they play. Obviously, that didn't happen. They didn't have chemistry early in the season. They've now not been on the same line for a little bit here. And, he's been with Marchand instead. And I've thought at times that it looked like there were some positive developments in terms of their chemistry, but it's definitely gone quiet again. Brian, like you're right. Like you do see, small plays, and like you see that there's a good, smart hockey player there. You need him to make more of an offensive impact, period. Like you just need him to make more plays, and you need him to shoot more. You need him to finish chances. You need him setting guys up more. Like he just needs to be more involved offensively. And that goes for a lot of guys, but listen, like he can't just be a passenger. He has to help drive play for this team, and that's not happening. So it's not enough to just take care of some of the little things and, make a nice little play here and there. Like he needs to be an impact player, and right now he's not.
Yeah, I mean, think about the main things he was brought in for, besides just, trying to make your top six stronger. It was to try to infuse something different to the power play, right? Like trying to get that Bergeron bumper back, and that's not what's happened. It's supposed to try to be another tool for the power play and make it better than last year, and the power play is worse than we've seen it, and they're bottom in the league. So that I don't think that's happened with Lindholm coming in. He also, like, the face-off stuff, like hoping that led to possession and ozone possession and therefore more goals. And, I just feel like those things haven't come to fruition for one reason or another. And not saying they can't, but it's been, we just haven't seen it through this chunk of games so far. And we're a decent portion into the season, right? Like we're halfway through November, and you would have liked to have seen it. I called into our Candid Heart, or the WEI afternoon show, however you want to say it.
I think it's now officially WEI afternoons. They've shortened it.
WEI
Much catchier.
Like the Utah Hockey Club, we are WEI afternoons. But so I called him and I was like, yeah, guys, I messed up my bold prediction big time, because I said that Pastrnak and Lindholm were going to come out of the gate and have all this chemistry, and Zacha, Lindholm, Pasta was going to be one of the best lines in the NHL, and they're not even a line anymore. Like they couldn't stick together. The chemistry wasn't there. Maybe both Pasta and Lindholm were dealing with some lingering something from an injury, but it just didn't work out that way. And that's what the hope was when you bring in Lindholm.
Well, you're not alone, Bridget. My bold prediction, and again, these were bold.
We were all like made to look stupid so far.
they were bold predictions, but based off of career highs last year for certain players, and then some of the players they brought in, I said they were going to have, maybe they'd have 720 goal scores. I don't know if they'll have 720 point scores this year, if I'm being honest with you. So I was dead wrong. And the three of us here, let's put some egg on our faces. We all picked them to go far into the playoffs, to the finals. Now, some of that was blind optimism combined with like, okay, they did go to the second round last year. They did improve on paper. Or you know what though? Maybe they didn't improve on paper, because DeBrusk is the obvious player that they lost, that they didn't replace, but you also were without a top line center last year. So in theory, on paper, you bring in Lindholm. Let's just wash those two away. I know one's a winger, but regardless, top six talent, 1 in, 1 out. Okay. But beyond DeBrusk and Elias Lindholm, Dan Heinen, and I know that the answer to all this is that they didn't have Swayman signed. They didn't know what the number was, so they let certain people walk. But Dan Heinen, very responsible two-way player, good skater, can provide offense, good defensively, and gives you speed and dependability. Jacob Lauko gives you speed. Jesper Boquist gives you speed and creativity. I actually was surprised that he spent a lot of time in Providence last year, because he proved to be a pretty good player for Boston and is doing really well in Florida right now. So between DeBrusk, Heinen, Lauko, and Boquist, you actually lost a good amount of speed that you really haven't replaced. And we know that the Bruins said they put an emphasis on getting faster. It's funny because last year watching the Bruins, they still didn't seem like that fast of a team. But when you talk about the players I just mentioned and how they're off the lineup now, like they got significantly slower. So maybe they're not better on paper this year than they were last year. I don't know.
Well, it's fair, but I can't let. So I want to. We talked about Lindholm. I brought up Swayman from the start. Like, I want to punch up at like the top players on this team because, sure, like you can question some of the moves, but they found good depth players. Like Kastelik and Koepke have been good additions. So it's not like the problems are at the bottom of the roster. They just have too many core players who just aren't playing the way that they're capable of and who have been wildly inconsistent. And like we've talked about, the point totals from your Coyle and Zaka and Frederick and Geeky, like all way lower than they need to be. But we also need to talk about the captains of this team, who this team is yo-yoing up and down with them. Like their play is just way too inconsistent from game to game. I gave them, and I know a lot of people gave them a ton of credit for the way that they led that third period comeback on Tuesday. And they did. Pastrnak and McAvoy dominated. Marchand was very good. That was your leaders like stepping up and being like, we're not losing this one. Okay, if we're going to give them that credit, then we also have to call them out when they play like ass the very next game. Like, they were all bad on Thursday.
I didn't think I was going to hear Scott say play like ass today, so that made me laugh.
Well, yeah, listen, you play like that, you get what you deserve. Pastrnak was especially awful. Like, I know he ends up scoring in the third period in garbage time, whatever. First two periods, 0 shots on goal from him. Just like completely disengaged, disinterested, lazy backhand flip in the neutral zone on the fourth goal. And then like gets compounded by Zadorov can't clear the zone. Zaka loses a battle. Fifth goal just a few minutes later. Final minute of the period, right? You want to try to close that period strong. Like, again, maybe you're not coming back from 3 goals down, but at least give yourself a chance. That entire line, Pastrnak, Zaka, and Geeky, Pastrnak included, like, just drifting on the back check. All watching the puck. And no one even looks at Evgeny Dadonov or picks him up coming down the off wing. Ends up all alone and beats Swayman. Another shot I think was stoppable, but like it's just a total lack of focus and intensity from your best players. Like McAvoy needs to be the elite number 1 defenseman that we know he can be and that he showed on Tuesday. You need that McAvoy with Hampus Lindholm out, especially. You didn't get that on Thursday. Like he didn't play like that. So yeah, like we can talk about roster moves and who's in, who's out, but the guys who are here should be a hell of a lot better than they've been this season. And I just think the whole like tenor of this team kind of goes as they go, as most teams do. You go as your best players go. And their best players are going up and down on a roller coaster.
So let me ask you guys this question, because Scott, you're right, and I only bring up the apples to apples roster because it's actually surprising that they do appear to be slower than they were last year. But you're right. It's okay. Lauko out, Koepke in. Like Maroon out, Kastelik in, and Kastelik is like, you lose JVR, little offensive punch. He was scratched for, handfuls of games at a time last year. So you're right, Scott. It is the best players. And I just want to say on Zadorov, like, I know he gets a lot of heat and I understand it all. There's a disconnect right now between the players and the coaching, and you see Zadorov on the bench after, I forget what it was, Dallas's fourth or fifth, I don't know. But Zadorov is involved, and it shows him on the bench afterwards. And I don't know if you guys saw this, but he looked like he was so angry at himself, so disappointed, so frustrated, embarrassed. Like, you can see the emotion on him. Like, he doesn't want to be playing this way. He's like, it's not like he doesn't give a shit. He doesn't know what's going on. And I think there's a disconnect between the coaching and the players. But Scott, to your point about the Bruins' top players, to me, you know me, I think players should be held to the utmost accountability. It's up to the players, these professional athletes, game in and game out, to motivate themselves. You shouldn't need a head coach behind you motivating you game in and game out for 82 games. You should be doing it yourself. With that in mind, that doesn't mean the coach shouldn't be trying to do it and doing it in different ways. What does that say about the leaders you're referring to, Scott, when they inevitably, tune out / don't like the messaging from big bad Bruce Cassidy, who ended up winning a Stanley Cup the following year? And by the way, the Bruins record was great underneath him, even when he got fired. But now they're tuning out potentially, or the messaging or the motivation is not getting through from Jolly Jim. Like, these are two polar different types of coaches that the Bruins seem to be lacking, motive. I mean, I'll be honest, guys, I don't even know if the Bruins appeared to be lacking motivation as a team when Cassidy was their coach. I was surprised by the firing, but regardless, you get my point here. Two completely different coaches, and so, like, if the Bruins are gonna bitch about having a coach that leans into him a little bit, and then they're playing uninspired hockey, whether they're motivated by Montgomery or not, their play is uninspired with a player-friendly coach who has gone outside his comfort zone at times this year to call out top players. What does that say about the leadership that two polar coaching styles doesn't matter? It gets to a point where it's just like they're not responding. To me, that's indicative and indictment on the leaders that have been around for multiple coaches now.
Well, I think that there's been so much turnover though since Montgomery first came in to now, that the result, like, one season they're breaking a record for most regular season wins, and then this year they're doing this. But you're missing guy like Bergeron and Krejci were there when Montgomery started. Like, this was a different team, and it had different leaders on it, like at the very top. And so it looked like it was going much better maybe than it really was. The messaging, like, because guys like Bergeron were there to I don't know, kind of coach as well. So it's just such a different team now, I would say. Like, obviously you still got,
but it worked last year though.
yeah. I mean, I guess it did, but there's also so many big and by the way, Brian, when you were mentioning like the on paper differences, like Linus Ullmark, we missed out. We missed that one. Like, that is a big.
But Korpisalo hasn't been an issue. He's been fine.
He hasn't been good. You can't go to him like you.
He's been better than both Swayman and Ullmark this season.
I hear what you're saying, Bridget. But my issue with the goaltending right now is Swayman.
Yeah. Oh yeah, no, it's not that. But like, you had, if one guy wasn't playing well, like the other guy was, and you didn't have to worry about it. Like, it would give someone time to get their together and maybe get rest, or I don't know. There was such a luxury to having that.
I mean, one thing I will say, like, here's something Montgomery can, and I don't care if goalie Bob's on board or not. Montgomery can say Swayman and Korpisalo are platooning now. They're going every other game. Korpisalo's outplayed Swayman this season. Like, that sends a message, doesn't it? Like, not that Korpisalo's been awesome, but reward the guy that's playing better and send a message to your $8.25 million goalie. Like, has Swayman earned 3 straight starts every week?
No.
All right, so there's something you can do. Like, you can take ice time away from him.
Yeah. I mean, but Yes, and I would consider that, Scott, for sure. And going into the season, one of the biggest arguments or trepidations people had was, don't give this guy too much money because he hasn't shown he can be the guy to carry the load all year because he's been splitting his whole career. And so far, he has not passed. I thought it'd be fine. I thought he would have no issue playing 55 games, but thus far he has not showed that he hasn't succeeded at that. I'm not saying he can't or won't, but so far he hasn't. Bridget, when were you living in Carolina? What year was that?
So I moved there in 2016 to 2018. So I was
Okay.
there.
How long ago does that seem to you right now?
A long time ago.
Okay. That's how long Charlie McAvoy has been playing in the National Hockey League. Where were you in 2014? In
College.
class at UMass?
Mhm.
Seems like a lifetime ago. That's when David Pastrnak was playing for the Boston Bruins. So
I was probably watching Bruins games like in class on my laptop. I know for a fact I watched the entire Olympics, Sochi Olympics, on my laptop in class and just wasn't paying any attention to schoolwork that week.
you and every other student. But I only bring up those points in time to illustrate that, yes, while they lost certain leaders from Montgomery's first year, like those players have been around for a long time. I mean, David Pastrnak has been a player in the National Hockey League for a decade now. Charlie McAvoy is not far behind him. Neither is Brandon Carlo. So again, like part of them being leaders is you have to be leaders now, and they're not kids anymore. So I think, and I mentioned this like I don't know 3 weeks ago, but like so far with them, with it being their show, yeah, Martian's still around. And last year they got by, but don't forget, last year they had Kevin Shattenkirk as a locker room guy. You had JVR as a locker room guy. You had Patrick Maroon in a later half of the year as a locker room guy. You lost some leadership that was immediate replacements to some that you lost the year prior. But now it's just Marchand. But it shouldn't be Marchand and the kid assistant captains. Like those guys are in their later 20s and they've been around for a long time. So they should be much better leaders than they are right now. And that to me is the concerning element that I'm watching Charlie McAvoy, who turns 27 next month, and David Pastrnak, who's approaching 30 in like a year and a half, 2 years. Like these guys aren't kids and they need to step up and be the leaders at the team. And we all thought they were going to be. And so far it hasn't been the case. That to me is the alarming part, because when shit hits the fan, the Bruins cower. This Bruins team, they hide. Outside of that St. Louis game, which is why I thought it felt different, because they finally showed some resolve. They get punched in the face. They go running. And that's not indicative of a Boston Bruins team that I've watched my whole life. And it starts with leadership. Would Bergeron and Chara allow that to happen? No, I'm not trying to compare Hall of Famers to these guys at this point, but you get what I'm saying. It starts with their leadership, no matter who the coach is.
Yeah, that they have to be a lot better. And like, yeah, obviously if it continues like this, they are going to be responsible for Montgomery getting fired. And I don't think they want that to happen. Like, I think this is a little different than Cassidy. I think Cassidy had kind of not lost the room, but guys were kind of sick of his messaging and approach to things. I don't really think that's happened here. I think the vast majority of this team still really likes Jim Montgomery and thinks he's a good coach, but they're not playing like they're responding to him.
He's too nice.
So like ultimately, he's going to be the one who gets shuffled out and changed out, and they're going to have to look in the mirror and be like, if you do like Jim Montgomery, like you just cost a good man his job because you haven't been able to get your crap together this season.
I don't doubt that they like him, and that's it's. And let's just put Monty to the side. Just generically speaking, like you can't have. And I want to give Monty credit because he did discipline Marchand and did scratch Pastrnak, but there has to be an element of fear with your coach that I just don't know if the Bruins have any sort of fear for their jobs or anything like that. With Monty, he's too nice. But Bridget has to go. Thank you all very much for listening, and we'll talk to you very soon. Hey guys, thanks for watching the Skate Podcast. If you want to see more of our videos, visit our playlist.
Not in front of a screen? You can listen to us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Don't forget to follow us on social media. And if you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to give us a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel, and leave a comment.